forward to just what we're able to do during these times. Ron, when I was upstairs, before we came to this room, I had the thought that what we're doing, who does it help and how does it help? And I thought of the song, it's a Maxwell song that says, "For lovers only." And even though he's talking about lovers, I'm gonna take what he's saying and say it this way: for those people who believe in possibility, for those people who think that they still have a heartbeat, whether it is with a spouse, a partner, your children, a family members, any human being, if you feel that that love is the space that you want to be in, then these things are really, they will really help you. But if you're in the space where you've just given up, which we hope you haven't given up on love, even if you have given up on love and dealing with a particular person, but you haven't given up on the life that you wanted to live before you got hurt, then I think this will be beneficial to you.
I think as well, before I said, what is my motivation for today? What will be the motivation? And that is domestic violence, and people are going through, and this season has given us a new meaning to the word or the phrase cabin fever.
Mm-hmm.
And we're used to it in the sense of being in for a snowstorm or something like that.
That's true.
But we've never experienced anything like this before as a people, at least those of us who are younger than those who have been around in these areas. And I've had several people I respect that were in the service, and they said, the service has prepared me for this because we often had to be in isolation for days on end while we had to deal with life and what was happening with life. And so one of the things that I'm recognizing is that I had to say, well, what's my motivation for tonight? Over the last season of my life, and it's been about a good 2.5 to 3 years now, I've had to let things go. And I had already I thought I had let things go. I thought I had laid stuff down. But then it got to a point, I said, what's your motivation? I said, well, my motivation for this is that there are some people who pull your strings. There are some people who pull your strings, they pull your emotional strings, and not just people, issues that pull on you. And if you can't let things go, then you can't move to possibility, and you can't, as we'll begin to talk, you can't find freedom. And as the overseer of this group of people, meaning to be first among equals, my goal will be able to help you to be able to let go some things and hopefully bring understanding to what it means to lay something down and let it go. Go ahead.
So let me clarify so you'll understand. When he says this group, he's talking about a Sunday morning group. This group right here, we're not your overseers at that point, right?
Right.
Okay, so something, a little something in the spirit is a bit different.
Right.
And yes, you are, that is a position. So I just want to clarify that because it may sound different to people who are just logging on to this broadcast. Okay.
All right. So what should I do differently? What should I say differently?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think I'm an overseer of this group. So
let me just say this: being a pastor, being someone who has had to help a lot of people and has had to be vulnerable and open to a lot of situations and things and subjects, and having to go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to different things and settling issues and that kind of stuff. I'm talking about in general in life.
Okay, wonderful. I just want to make sure though, if we have guests that they don't know that part. That I just want to.
Well, that's why I'm asking you, so that I can get clarity on what you're saying.
Clarity is just that we're doing a little something in the spirit, and that statement definitely is appropriate. Like I said, it's like having guests in your house. I just want you to know the guests
Right.
We understand what we're saying. There's some people who are watching us and they are part of our group, and then there's some people who are not members of that group. And so I just want to say, well, we all care about each other, just didn't want to misunderstand. That's all it is, just a little thing. That's it.
All right. And I get to ask clarification so I get to understand, but I'm good now. I'm here, and hopefully tonight is that we'll share something, even right now, even if I'm not clear, how you have to let things go and you have to lay it down. Mm-hmm. And so there are two things to understanding. What we're attempting to do, and what I had to attempt to do, Jill, is live my life led by the spirit of goodness, the spirit of truth, as opposed to live my life lived by an ego. And that I came to a conclusion that if I'm going to love my family, if I'm going to love you, if I'm going to be a good friend, if I'm going to be able to get to the next level and transcend even hard times or difficult times, then there's two things that has to happen. And God has to bring you to a place of total dependence and total surrender. Mm-hmm. I've taught this for years, and I not only taught it, I've had to live it. Total dependence and total surrender. Mm-hmm. And you introduced me to a scripture last week, Isaiah 22:5, when it says, "For the Lord, the host of the day, the Lord of hosts has a day of panic and tumult, of trampling and of confusion. In the valley of vision, a day of breaking down walls and a crying for help to the mountain." That's Isaiah 22:5. And what I got from that is that there is a day where your soul goes through. There's a day where there are walls that you have to cry out to and ask God to be able to remove it. Mm-hmm. And now that we have had to be closer in our relationships, if we have attempted to go ahead and be human, then we end up valley is a place where you make decisions. Mm-hmm. Valley, like when we talk about wilderness, it's a place where you make decisions.
Right, and I like it when it says in the valley of vision, a day of breaking down walls, and you can think of the place where you're gaining vision, where revelation takes place. And what we've learned, even in the situation, relationships, as we talk about today, that we call it the revealing, revelation to reveal, pretty much the same thing, and that this is the place of reveal. And in the place of reveal, that's the place of crying out. It's a place where some walls have to come down, because this is where you discover some things that you may not have paid attention to, or well, I was supposed to say pay attention to before we were in a situation where we couldn't kind of come and go as we have been able to do prior to COVID.
I've had to make myself before all this ain't about COVID for me. Mm-hmm. This is about life. Mm-hmm. And before this season in my life came to my life, I had to do business with fear. Mm-hmm. I had to do business with being paralyzed. And I had to realize that every crisis has a seed of hope in there, mm-hmm. and an answer in there. And inside the crisis, you can also find the bridge to where you need to go. And that I've had to learn over the years, total dependence, total surrender. Mm-hmm. Total dependence is when you get to a place that you're thoroughly convinced that you can do nothing apart from wisdom, apart from the Spirit of God. Mm-hmm. In our relationship, we had to get to a point that it was not about us just sitting right down having face-to-face meetings anymore. It wasn't just about us and we do have conversations and we do talk, but I had to get to a point where I realized that when I said I'm bringing God into my arguments, I couldn't go off half-cocked on some ranting tirade or verbal tirade, mm-hmm. on how you don't understand what I'm going through, you don't get my point, and you don't understand this. It had to be, God, I depend on you. And the same way I find answers for those that I lead, which is one of the reasons I put that out there, those who I have to lead in wisdom, my family, whatever, I've got to be completely dependent upon you. Not any past stories that I've had with you, but to bring God into my arguments and be able to make the adjustments. And I found out that I said, you're two-faced, Deron. You can make adjustments when it matters with certain people. Then when they get with your wife, you go ahead and let it all hang out, and you don't let it go. I got to let that stuff go.
Right. And let me tell y'all something that what happened. A real situation that happened in order for us to get to the point where we recognize that there needed to be a switch. There needed to be a switch. And there was a time where I felt like, you know what? You calling me your wife isn't working, so call me Jill.
Right.
Call me Jill. Because maybe if we didn't have a label, maybe if your mindset didn't, maybe your mindset is into something that makes, the response to a wife different from someone else you love, some friend, some person going through, someone else that's hurting. And so why am I telling you that? Because it gets really real. It gets really real, and then there's two parties, and we're both in a situation. And so when he says that, it doesn't just fly off. It's not just talk. See, I want to put meat as we go through these things. We'll talk about things. We'll put meat on these on the bones of it, on the structure of it. And the structure absolutely is realizing, however you came to that reveal, that, wait a minute, and I pray that everybody comes to that reveal, whether it is, there are people who treat their children, other people's children better than they treat theirs, or they have more patience with other people's children because of the expectations you have of your own children. But then we will all come to the conclusion that, listen, love is love is love, and no one wants to be less loved simply because they're closer to you.
Until you can grab onto the truth of total dependence. And when I say grab onto the truth of total dependence, that means when you realize you are utterly hopeless and you realize you're helpless. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get empowered by the Spirit of God, you don't get empowered by His revelation, then it's not going to work. It's got to get to a point, my friends, that when you got to run out of your explanations and everything. And you've got to do complete total dependence and total surrender. And total dependence is when you let the mental, physical, and the emotional valleys that come your way understand that this season is fertile ground. Mm-hmm. This season, as hard as it appears to be, this is the place where you grow. This is the place where roots are able to get deeper in the spirit realm. And you've got to allow yourself to experience this. Many of us have been so accustomed just to being able to get through or get by something and not feel it. But this is the season where you've got to feel your feelings and think your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And total surrender is the second part of this. When you have to come to a point where you realize, I am completely obligated to do something that I'm unprepared to do. When you are in total surrender, you're now saying, all right, I gave it my best shot. Mm-hmm. It didn't work. Mm-hmm. Or it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. Mm-hmm. And so now in this family, in this relationship, in my mouth, in what I normally say, I'm going to do total surrender. I will not speak unless I am spoken to by wisdom. I will not speak unless I've sat with something long enough to be able to speak on it, because we can all be in a point of stress, and surrender means letting it all go and recognize that I'm hopeless without you, and the only way I can get help, Father, is if that you come into our situation.
And how does that look in my life? How did that look? What you say? How did that look in my life? You know, it is a, we say it this way, it's a letting go and it's a laying it down. And until I laid down that thing, that belief I had, maybe it was a vow I made a long time ago, what I wasn't going to allow to happen to me again, or how I wasn't going to allow something to happen to me that happened to my mother or somebody I cared about because I was a witness to something. And so there were things that I could let go, but I wasn't laying down my huff. I wasn't dealing with the spirit of it. The physical thing, yes. I could not talk about it You cannot talk about something, but it doesn't mean that you've laid it down. Because you can suppress it.
Right.
See, letting it go has to do with emotionally dealing with it and allowing the areas of my thoughts and what I think about it, but also allowing the areas, the space in my heart to be challenged. Jill, are you holding on to something?
Right.
And if so, what are you standing strong on something? Listen, I couldn't lay things down in this house if I still had my some of those street rules I came up with. If I still believe that if I loved you a certain way, that I knew that the way I would be fulfilled is that I would give it to you and you would reciprocate it in a way that made me feel like I was fulfilled. Well, I had to I had to challenge my own expectations of what I thought a man or woman should be.
Right. And I've kept these over here is because for years, and I learned this years ago to be in tune. But to really be in tune, we must understand that life is lived in such a way that you can't hear this, but I can feel the vibration of this tuning fork. Mm-hmm. And this one is a lower vibration than this one right here, which is a higher vibration. And I had to get to a point where I stopped allowing people's vibrations to move me. Mm-hmm. When you let something go, you've got, man, this thing is still, I had to really slow it down. When you hit these tuning forks, it's used to tune pianos and instruments. These vibrations, you can feel it. Well, if you're not careful, you'll let your life, someone else's life being disturbed, that vibration calls you to act out of character. Mm-hmm. Calls you. I now have to allow you to get hit with something and allow you to have your vibration and go through what you got to go through mm-hmm. without reacting. I've told a couple of people I love, I said, respond, don't react. Mm-hmm. Because if you react to that vibration, you're going to miss what God is attempting to do.
Absolutely. And I've learned that responding requires me to really listen for what's the real issue? What's really going on? Is someone speaking like this because they are hurt? Is it really not about me? Most of the time, it's not about me. If you're too bothered, it's really about your own triggers and how your own triggers have been hit by someone else.
Right. But
you do have to ask yourself, what is it? Does this have anything to do with me? And if so, what should I get out of this? But trying to change somebody, no.
Yeah, you got to get to the point that you may feel the vibration of someone and you may feel where they are, but you have an internal responsibility to be able to deal with that. And so when you let something go, it's about letting go and dropping the weight of that inner pressure. If you would feel some kind of way, I would feel some kind of way. And then if I didn't learn how to respond to wherever you were going through and say, now tell me, what is my proper response to this? What am I to say to something like this? Am I to say anything? And the only way to let something go is that when you let go that inner pressure, that's when happiness comes into play. So letting something go is to reclaim your freedom. When you let something go, there was a couple of things that happened in my life over the last 5 years or so that I had no choice but to let it go. It's longer than that. It's been many years. But I've had some things that I had no choice but to say, Deron, let this go. Stop even letting this be in your purview. And the way to let things go is to cultivate an awareness, to detach and discover who you are. And so when you're going to let something go, that means that you must detach for something that you were attached to, a feeling, a thought, a manner of responding. There's certain, if somebody called me a certain name, I would respond that way. I had to cause myself to detach from those verbal triggers and say, you don't have to act like this, Deron. You don't have to go there. And it's not just positive affirmation. It is making a decision to choose life and not death.
And when I think about you're talking about, I think you said letting it go is dropping the weight of it. Where's the weight really? It's in your spirit. It's in your spirit. And I think that's the work of the spirit, the work of mastering our emotions, the work of the truth that sets us free, the work of going into the light and allowing yourself to be in the light. I think what you just said a second ago was that when you let it go, you detach and discover your true self. You sure do. You discover your true self when you stand in the light, not when you put someone else in the light.
Right.
You discover the truth. Your truth will set you free. Right. His truth has not set me free.
Right.
His truth has not set me free. It is the truth about what's going on with me, what's moving me, what my angst is, what's my level of frustration. Where is that coming from? What are my detachments? What am I afraid of? What am I holding on to that I think if I let it go, I'm going to lose some part of myself and my identity?
There you go. When you detach, and this is if you want peace. Now, if you're in a point where you say, "Hey, I got peace at all times, I'm good," then pray for us. Pray for me, because I have had to say, "God, help me to center myself," and to center myself is to be still. Now, what gives my attachment strength? In other words, how can I be attached to something and it have strength over me? And that is because when I look at the attachment, I look at it with conditional love. Meaning I look at what I'm attached to and I place conditions on it. And so if I'm not careful, I'll look at myself in the mirror and expect myself to meet certain criteria at every moment, as opposed to just being in the moment. And so sometimes, Jill, I've had to get to a point now that I can look at myself and I don't have an unworthy expectation of myself. I don't have a lofty expectation of myself, some place of perfection, because if you're not careful, you can constantly look at yourself and do a number on yourself because you're attached to a certain feeling that I don't feel okay unless everything is perfectly in where I need it to be. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and I think you said this earlier. The word that fits in there is comparison.
Right.
When we do that, we end up dealing with different weights. You know, sometimes you think you are great. You know, now there's a time to look at what somebody else go through and say, "I'm thankful, God.
Right.
I'm thankful that." You know, what's the song? It could have been me outdoors with no food and no clothes. You know, so we have that song that we sing. You know, but it's comparison. In the world, this is how the world keeps certain people where they want those people to be, because they keep showing you a picture, keep telling you that this is a picture that's just fine, and then find yourself trying to compare yourself to it. I said this on another broadcast, and how there's a time that came with some of the celebrities, what they would do is they would go on with no makeup. And the motives behind them, or their why at the time, was they wanted these people, these younger girls, people that looked up to them, to know that they didn't wake up looking like that. They didn't wake up looking like that because somebody went hard on themselves because they didn't wake up with looking like the people on television that they admire. And I thank God for these people who did that, because they took a chance to help these younger girls who haven't had a lot of experience to come into the real world. In our real world, we do not wake up looking like this. This is 4 or 5 hours worth of prep, is what they would have said. But this is what they had to do, because comparisons. You know, the Bible tells you what drives a man is a man's appetite is his neighbor. You know, how does comparisons work in motivation? You know, somebody has a new car, now you want a new car. Whether you can afford it or not, all of a sudden you're on this page, and these are the things that you think that you need, but they're really your wants. You know, at times, sometimes maybe it is your need and it's your want, and so that comparison thing, that's a big deal. And this is why
comparison is a sin. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Listen, comparison. It's called the sin of comparison. And if you're not careful, you can get caught up in the sin of comparison and begin to look at someone else's life. I wrote down, and it got to one point that I was looking at other pastors and other churches and all these different things, and I was like, well, God, that's not how I roll. That's not the way you have used me. And then wisdom finally said, listen, stop comparing. I know what I'm doing with you. And I have asked you to equip as many people as possible to have relationships and to do these different things. And you can't look at yourself through the lens of somebody else's eyes. Look at yourself through the lens of my eyes, meaning my Creator's eyes. And he says, as long as I'm telling you, well done, then that's all that's needed. And when I started doing that, I began to understand that I'm wonderfully, fearfully and wonderfully made, which means I accept myself, flaws and all. I accept everything, and I accept you, flaws and all. And when I do that, then I allow freedom to enter into our space, because I'm no longer I'm not allowing myself to be irritated by vibrations. It's life. It's life. Go ahead.
And to be in tune has to do with a correct sound. It has to do with sound being correct. That's why they use that to tune a piano or tune an instrument. When they do certain things to tune an instrument, it's because they want that instrument to have a correct sound. It sound the way that instrument is supposed to sound versus what it sounds like when it's not in tune. And so one of the things that I think is very important, and one day, we'll get to this separately or together or separately, but that once knowing what it is to really be in tune and to be with someone else who has to be in tune to their own vibrations, and you have to be in tune to yours. And oftentimes, Deron, what happens is we try to change that. We try to line somebody up with what feels so right for us. But once you learn to love yourself, but to truly trust yourself, you will give other people permission to be themselves. When you liberate yourself, when you truly liberate yourself, you give people permission to be free in your space.
Right.
And so are you going to say something?
Go ahead.
And I think when I think about just being in tune and absolutely knowing the purpose of things, knowing the root of situations, because if you don't know the why, as I would say, if you lose your why, you lose your way. If you don't know the why of something, you will use it incorrectly. You may even not appreciate it on the level that it needs to be appreciated, including yourself. Not value something on the level that it needs to be valued, because you don't really understand the why of it. And so once I understood and I tried to understand this person as an individual, not somebody who belonged to me, but as an individual, then I was in a better position to be able to love you with knowledge and not with whatever my expectations were, although you still need to have some. But I've learned to dwell with you in knowledge. And it was constant warfare when I had the role that I thought you should play. I had the wisdom from the world, but I had not lived in a situation with you to see how can I deal with you, this person. And with some, it's not trouble free. It's not complication free, but I know how to deal with this person. And not lose myself at the same time.
Zach said to the men on one of the calls, Tough Talk Thursday, and he said it to me and he said to other people, he said, it's game time. It's game time. And when I say game, when he said game, I asked him, I said, tell me what you mean. And he says, you got to put everything up that you have learned. And you got to bring your A game. You got to bring the best skills you have. And I realized for me in our relationship and with my family and my friends that it's game time. And in it being game time, I look at life. You got to ask yourself, we're going to now use the analogy of stadium and or an arena. Right now, they're getting ready to play games in empty arenas with no fans. But if you go back to the way it used to be, the stadium or the arena would be filled with people. And so you have to ask yourself, when I'm playing the game of life, what is my perspective? Am I in the coach's booth? Am I in the stands? Am I on the sidelines? Or am I down there in the arena playing? Am I getting challenged? Is my face, am I getting sweaty? Am I in the place to be hurt? And if you look at it and you decide that this is game time, then you begin to realize it is game time that I find the love within myself, and I find the love for my family, my friends, and everyone. And so if it's game time, because sometimes if you look at it, players, you can be great or you can be mediocre. And when you go to a game, oftentimes when you are on the game of life, the first level in the game of life I call the authentic self. Level one is authentic self. And the level one means is that you can be great, you can watch what's going on and you accept what is, and if you're a spectator and you're watching the game and you are in the moment and you're not rooting for either side, you're just enjoying the exercise, you're enjoying the outing, you're enjoying the energy of the fan or the participants and everybody that's there. And when the whistle is over, win or lose, when the game is over, you leave the stadium, you leave the arena, and we had a good time. And you walk away, but you don't take anything with you because you were just there as yourself. But then there comes a time, Proverbs 17:12, where it says, abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. Tempers explode. Proverbs 17. And so there are times that if you're not careful, that you can be so caught up in the game itself that you're caught up in spectating that you're not living in now, Jill. Right. And so whoever returns evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. You got to be able to walk away from the game and say, I saw it, I was there, but it didn't make me who I was. You get it? Mm-hmm. So now, then there's another level of the game of life, and that is I can enjoy one moment at a time without having an attachment to it. Meaning when I used to be a Redskin fan, and when I say not that I'm not a Redskin fan, but when I had season tickets and the whole 9 yards, I had to begin to detach myself from their winning. Why? Because if they lost, I would have a bad day. I would have a bad hour or a bad couple of days because once again, my level of attachment was based upon I found my identity in a sports team as opposed to finding my identity within God, my identity within my Savior, my identity in the spirit realm. And once you find your identity in that, you become committed to a team. And then if they lose, you lose. If they win, you win. And I'm not telling you not to be connected to somebody, but you got to understand it's game time, and we don't have time to be all over the place.
I think one of the things that you was talking about, and you said, when it comes to the game of life, let me go to the first one I like to comment on, the authentic part. And that is you see life as what it is, and you're not emotionally invested a certain way, in a way where you're not balanced. You're not invested that way. So when you I think Deron, sometimes when in terms of the second scenario that you use, is that folks will go to the game and somebody else gives you life. You know, your sense of winning. That's what I'm trying to say. That your sense of winning in the second part of the game, whatever you were just talking about, where you go and you are emotionally invested. But sometimes, and we've done this, and this is my hope, that these over time things can do for you. That it'll put you in a place where, listen, there's no win like you're wrong. There's no win like you're wrong. Sometimes by osmosis, we think if we're connected to somebody that's doing great, it's going to rub off on us. But self-esteem, you can't give that to someone. That has to be earned. This is why if you don't play the game yourself, you're gonna find yourself not in tune and a few steps off beat because you are depending on someone else's wins to give you a level of esteem. And it doesn't. It may make you feel good. It may give you something to talk about. It may give you something to brag about to your boys. Let me not say that these days, but to some
your friends,
male or female.
Yeah.
It may give you some time to do all those kind of things. But it's not until you put your hand to the plow where that well done flipped around. You done well. I can tell you well done. You can say, Jill, you did a good job. And if I know that I didn't do my best, you can't tell me I did my best when my heart knows I did. And that's the place Deron, where some of us are living, that with a depression and certain things come in because in some area, I'm not saying you do Jill's best or Deron's best or your family's best. I'm talking about your best, and find out what that is. Find out what your best is without thinking that your best is based on comparing yourself to someone else.
The moment, I'm just going to read this.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's lack of performance, if their lack of performance, the moment someone else's behavior defines you, you will take this knowledge with you and begin to shape parts of your life around a team or a person. If you're not careful, when he says to let stuff go, I had to get to a point that if I'm allowing your emotional state to define me, if I'm allowing your lack of sowing what you needed to sow when you needed to sow it, or whatever it is, once I let your behavior determine how I feel about myself, then what is going to happen is that I bring chaos into my environment. I bring noise into my environment. And this is why I've learned to keep my space pure, to say, yes, I hear what they're experiencing, I hear what they're going through, but at the same time, I must keep my space pure, and I cannot allow your lack of self-esteem to cause me to lose my self-esteem.
Absolutely. And so, again, this is the work you have to do as an individual. I don't know what side of the road you are in terms of what Deron just said, but of course, when someone else's mood affects you, don't ever think that someone else's mood can't affect you, but it's when it defines you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now I'm not sure. I wish I could quickly think of something that would say, well, Jill, what does it look like in your life when someone's a mood defines you? And I probably could have told you that a long time ago, but I have so, I like to say this in my heart. I used to say this to people. What I'm doing is not against you. It's for me. And sometimes, I had to keep saying that to myself because at some point, not just with you, but just in life, that if you do something for you, and I'm not even talking about something drastic that's like overtly selfish, right? But you do something for you, like walking away, okay? You see an argument or something get ready to happen. At one point, I would get in arguments, and probably Deron would get in arguments with me because I could see that it just wasn't a good space. Wasn't nobody listening because we're trying to win some kind of verbal battle.
Point, right?
And wasn't nobody listening, and so I had to say, well, one of us had to walk away. But long ago, I wouldn't walk away because then walking away would look like I'm rejecting him. Walking away would look like I was disrespecting somebody. Walking away or not responding would look like a certain way to the people in the room. And I didn't know what to do with that quiet space. I didn't know what to do with that space that felt like a disconnect just happened. Well, until I understood what I meant by this is not against you, this is for me. Until I realized, and this came from me being honest with myself about me, that when two people are arguing, ain't nobody listening. If you all had a point that was worth making, it is not going to survive in an argument in a place where two people are just trying to get their points. Nobody's listening. So we had to learn to say, one of us had to do it.
Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Go ahead.
It was meant for us. We had to shelf some things. Drop the matter. See, this is what let it go mean. Drop the matter. But I'm saying this to you all because sometimes dropping the matter creates another conflict. And that you just gonna walk away from me while I'm talking? So now you got all of these things that keep coming up, and all you're trying to do is the right thing.
And we had to agree that if one of us asks, all right, let's just put this on, let's drop this matter. Let's not talk about this right now. If we said, and it was a long time ago, I don't want to talk about this. Well, you get the opportunity to get yourself together. I get the opportunity to get myself together. And I no longer get into a discussion, and it's taken a lot of practice, but you drop the matter before a dispute breaks out.
That's laying it down.
And we lay it down. So sometimes we can be in the car and we get into a discussion and it looks like it's going somewhere. Maturity is when you can tell yourself, brother, chill out, man. Let it go.
Now let me say this. Let me go from my ill self. Let me expose my ill self, and then I'll introduce you to this self. See, my ill self, at during the time, my imbalanced self would feel that right when it looked like I was about to make a point or win, and he was about to lose, all of a sudden he wants to stop the argument, and that's what I would tell myself. Now you don't want to talk because you about to see that your point didn't make any sense, or that you was wrong, or this, that, and the other. And as long as I was fighting to win something that's not a win, it wasn't a real win. Getting my point was never a real win, and until I learned that wasn't a real win, I didn't get to see. And I tell you, I always think about the show Punk'd, and how on Punk'd, how when they would pretend like they maybe stole somebody's car, would wreck somebody's car, and a person's emotions would just be wilding out, and then they say, our word is psych, or this isn't real, you've been punked, and then the person will have to pull that back in. That's how it would feel to me. That's how I would feel. That now all of a sudden I'm on the road, but that exposed my disposition. My disposition about life, not just loving another person, about loving me, about how I did warfare with me. And so definitely all of these things are done, and these things happen. But what do I want you to know? Listen. I got a couple of things that I believe in my heart. I used to tell people, I don't want nobody that don't want me. Then people thought, oh, she don't want nobody that don't want her. That meant, and they did their own interpretation. Here's my interpretation. I don't want to work that hard.
That's it.
I don't want to work so hard that I got to try to make somebody stay who wants to go. I don't. I have one life on this earth that I know about. And I don't want to spend it trying to convert somebody who seems to want to be somewhere else. I mean, it was too much. I went through that in my teens, and I wasn't willing to go through that in marriage. And so, again, love yourself. Some things you do for you, it may feel like it's against somebody else, but know your own heart and know what is motivating you, and stay true to yourself and trust yourself.
This evening was a little something in the spirit where we learn to drop the matter before a dispute breaks out, to let it go, to lay it down, and decide that I'm going to play above the rim. My goal this evening, Lord willing, was that you would understand that you can change your environment by changing your response to the people in your life. If you have something that you would like to add to what we have been talking about, because at this point, I think we've tapped on the reality, and that is you've got to be able to drop this matter and allow God to reveal himself to you.
Absolutely. And the only thing I want you to know, because sometimes this is what I'm going to add, want you to know is that sometimes when you are dropping a matter and it sounds like dropping it, then everything is going to feel peachy creamy. It's not. It's not. When you have been in a dysfunctional, combative, destructive, relationship, argumentative, just everybody kind of going solo. When anger comes, we forget that we were ever friends or we ever cared about each other. If you've been in that situation, then your choice is the emotion of it and the feeling and the misunderstanding and the misinterpretation that comes with change doesn't happen immediately. But change happens as soon as you say in your heart that I want out of whatever I've been doing. Listen, you already on your way.
That's it.
But and I learned this from John Maxwell, is that we don't make a whole bunch of decisions in life. We just have to maintain the ones that we make.
Right.
And so once you make that decision that I want out of this, don't let anybody, this is what we cover, pull you back in. I don't allow that. And I used to allow that, and I would explode anytime there was explosion. You want something? I got something to give too. But no, because one day I read a card from Maya Angelou, and somebody gave me a card, and somewhere in it, and I used this, and I said five things, right? You write 5 things that relate to the woman that you want to be, that you are most proud of. If that's a man out there or a woman, listen, what would make you proud of you? Put that in front of you. Someone came to Jesus to say, hey, what must I do to have eternal life? And what does the first commandment really mean, or the second commandment? And Jesus said, how do you read it?
Right.
And when he read that second commandment, and he told Jesus, how do I read? You should love your neighbor as you love yourself. First love God, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is what Jesus said to him. You do that right there, and you will be saved. You will be delivered from whatever is trying to bind you. Listen, you decide what will make you proud of you. And then you do that. And that yoke and that feeling of insecurity and that ability for somebody to pull you back and forth because they have a definition of what they want to be proud of when it comes to you, it won't have that kind of power. What do you say about you? Who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? Start right there. And your deliverance is right there, just waiting for you to say, yep, I agree with that inner voice that says, this is when I feel good about myself, this is what makes me most proud of myself. And what other people say, it may matter, but it's not going to be louder than that voice. And that's all you're trying to get to. And the rest will not just be history, but possibility. And that means the sky's the limit for you and for me. And for the rest of us that says, we're willing to lay it down and we're willing to let it go. Because we want better.
And when you know better, you do a whole lot better. I hope that this blessed you, a little something in the spirit, and we were able to share a little something in the spirit. I don't have anything else to
Okay, well,
share.
I'll just say this. Listen, when we do this every Sunday. Well, so far every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. One of the things that we ask you to do, at least for right now, there are people who ask, well, what can we do? I mean, how can we bless you all? Or what should I do at this moment? Well, if that is coming in your mind or in your heart, then you can go to Kids Eat Free Now. We feed kids every week. You can go to Kids Eat Free Now and make a donation to them so that we can continue to feed kids and families even more now that this pandemic has not only hit families, but it's also roughed up the economy pretty badly. So go to kidseatfreenow.com and just go to the donate button and just go through the website, period. You maybe want to volunteer. There are ways to go to Amazon wish list and send food. But whatever you do, it will be with the part that you can play because you were blessed today and now you want to be a blessing. And that's how you can help us.
And soldiers, I've already begun to talk to some other people. I appreciate both brothers and sisters who are showing up, and we have an outreach thing that we will do in the very, very near future, Lord willing. Because what we're seeing is that people are showing up. We had a Hispanic sister show up last week and say, I don't have anything to give, but she made masks for a couple of people because she just said, listen, you all are blessing my family, and I like to do something for you all as well. And so this season, I'm looking forward to some major outreach that we will do as a group of people. And it took a while to get to it, but I think that we figured out how we could do an outreach and still be socially distant and still make some things happen. But that's pretty much it. I'm through with the night.
Absolutely. You all be kind to each other.
Yeah.
Learn something. You had a little shift happen right now. Put immediately before you look in the mirror, forget what you look like, and forget the change, and forget how you feel. Do one thing that you heard today. Just do it today, and I believe you're gonna have an opportunity to do it. If you live with a human being, if you know other human beings, you will have the opportunity to practice something that you heard today. So I hope you're able to do that. And with all that said, good night.
Amen. Much love, you guys. Love you, and we beat you to it.